Hi, I'm Anthony Andelin, the Chief Operations Officer at Bedrock Investment Property. And today I want to talk to you about the benefits that real estate provides. Now, if you're watching this video and you're a little bit more of a seasoned real estate investor, this one might not be for you. I want to make sure that you understand the foundational elements of why real estate makes sense. So feel free, if you're a little bit more seasoned, a little bit more experienced, you already have a pretty good grasp of these concepts, it's okay to move on to another one. But this is really kind of for those first-time investors that are really saying, why should I get into real estate? What can it do for me? And is that something I want to add into my plan? The first real benefit that we see is that real estate produces income now, not down in the road in the future, but today. And so as you look at this cash flow, you might say, where does this income come from? Well, because we're buying investment real estate, it's coming from a tenant that is occupying your property. These are non-owner occupied homes, and they're paying you rent to live in that space. Now, as we look at that income, then you might say, wow, this is great. I'm getting $1,500 a month, $2,000 a month of income. That is true. But just like any investment out there, whether it's your brokerage accounts and you're paying management fees, whether it's insurance opportunities and you're paying the cost of insurance, real estate has expenses just like everything else. Now, you might say, what are some of those expenses? Well, as we look at our income, we start with our gross rents. And then we have to subtract the operational expenses. Things like debt service payments. Typically, many of you are going to be financing a property. That means you're going to put a down payment down on the home. You're going to go to a bank or a lender who's going to finance the difference over a period of time. There's cost, there's a payment on that debt service. We have taxes, property taxes that have to be paid in real estate. We have things like insurance on the homes. We want to make sure that the homes are insured against any type of acts of God, fire, destruction, so that you're protected in your investment. Where you choose to own your properties, there might be homeowner association fees. We might look at management expenses, whether it's a property management or an overtype service that Bedrock Administration Services provides. You might have repairs on those properties. There might be vacancies where a tenant doesn't pay rent. During the COVID-19 pandemic, we've only had a couple of houses that have missed 1 month's rent. That can happen as people go through different life experiences. In addition, you might have legal expenses, whether it's setting up an entity or working through an eviction. But real estate has expenses. So as we start with that gross income and we pay our expenses, we have what's left over. We call that the net income. If you have a current property that is negative cash flowing, come talk to us and let's see if we can help create a solution to increase your income. But that is how we generate our first benefit of real estate, is cash flow by the renters occupying our properties. Our next benefit that we see from investment real estate are tax breaks. Now, I don't know if you knew this, but cash flow is not subject to the self-employment tax. Well, you might say, well, Anthony, what is the self-employment tax? This is where we get to pay our Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid expenses. And with your job and your W-2 check that you get, that expense is taken out of your paycheck before it's even deposited to you, right? So the government trusts you to pay it so well, they're taking it before you even have a chance to see it. That is the self-employment tax. Rents are not subject to the self-employment tax. Now, as you look at then where you live and where you own your properties, some states have higher and some states have lower state income taxes. For example, California is one of the highest states in the country when it comes to your state income tax. You're paying 13.3%. You might then look at Utah, which is kind of right there in the middle at a 5% flat state income tax rate. But there are some states like Florida, which is one of our hot markets that we invest into in the Orlando, Central Florida area, has 0 state income tax. So as we then look at the benefits, where you choose to own your properties are going to be taxed differently than maybe where you currently live or reside. Now, as we go back in time to December 2017, when Congress is passing tax legislation right before Christmas, and there was this legislation took a little bit of time to kind of negotiate and debate, but it was kind of slammed through right before Christmas. Some of you might have been very ecstatic about this more simplified tax structure. Some of you, maybe if you're in California, might be a little bit more opposed to this, because what happened is when it comes to your types of deductions that we used to be able to claim and write off on our taxes pre-2017, things like mortgage interest, there's now a cap on those properties at $10,000, and you cannot And that cap on the value of the home is at $750,000. So if you're living in the Bay Area of San Francisco or East Bay, guess what? There's a good chance the value of your home is higher than that. And that deduction being capped, maybe it's taking some money out of your pocket in terms of taxes. When it comes to property taxes, same thing. There's a $10,000 cap on what you can deduct on your property tax deduction. Now, with Bedrock and with our guidance of Bedrock Property Administration, we want to make sure that you're optimizing all your tax benefits. And with the right entity structure that's set up with my partner, Jeremy Watson, who is an expert in this field, we can help make sure that you're capturing all of your mortgage interest deduction, your property taxes, depreciation. Now, let's talk about depreciation for a moment. Depreciation exists for all non-owner occupied properties. You cannot depreciate your primary residence. Now, the formula for this is you look at the purchase price at the time you acquire property and you times it by 80%. 20% of that value is estimated for the dirt, and we cannot write down the dirt or land the home sits on. But the structure can be depreciated then at 80% of the purchase price over 27.5 years. Plus, a lot of the operational expenses I talked about with our cash flow can be tax deductible. And our goal with our real estate is to have you pay a minimum amount of taxes on the income those properties are generating for you. Now, this one might seem a little simple as you look at this next benefit, which is mortgage pay down. When you make a mortgage payment on your loan, what happens to your loan balance? Well, of course, it starts to go down, right? And over time, whether it's a 10, a 15, a 30-year mortgage, that liability eventually goes down to zero. And that means the full value of the asset is now shown on your balance sheet, right? Now that means as each time you make that mortgage payment, your balance is going down, your net worth is then proportionately going up by the same amount, the same ratio. Real estate is one of those benefits. You're building equity and net worth even by making that mortgage payment. Without a lot of outside appreciation on the home, that value or the equity in that home is increasing. Now, appreciation is one of those things that we always want to see in our investments. We always want to see that the value is going up over time, correct? That's part of the reason why we do this. Now, in real estate, historically in this country, real estate has grown by 5.4%. Now, as you look at your area, how did you compare to that? Were you a little bit above or a little bit below that? If I look at where I live in Utah, we've been seeing about 5 to 7% growth for roughly the last 8 to 9 years. In the markets that we typically invest into, which are Memphis, Tennessee, the Orlando, Florida area, and Charlotte, North Carolina, these three areas in the last 12 months have grown by 9 to 14%. That is fantastic growth. Now, I mentioned the Bay Area earlier. I'm going to come back to that market. Last year, that area grew by about 8.5%. And the projection for 2020 is that we should see that even go down a little bit closer to maybe 4 or 5%. So as you look at the type of appreciation you're currently earning in your market, how do you measure to the historical average of 5.4%? And how are you doing compared to our other markets of 9 to 14%? I want to talk about one of the houses that I own in my portfolio. Now, I bought a house in Davenport, Florida in 2015, in December, so at the end of the year. Okay, I bought this home for $143,000. It was 1,800 square feet, 4-bedroom, 2-bath. It's about 25 minutes southwest of Disney World gates. It's been a great property for me. Today, that house is worth about $227,000. That's an increase of $84,000. And I get really excited when I get values back from our team on the value of this home. But one of the things you have to remember with appreciation is we want to make sure it's happening each year. But when do you realize the growth of those dollars? Well, not until you sell the house in the future. Otherwise, we are subject to the ups and downs of the market. So one of our jobs at Bedrock is to help keep you time in the market to make sure that we're participating in the growth, but also letting you know when it's time to get out so that we can capitalize on as much of that growth as possible. So with appreciation, we want to make sure we're focusing on areas of the country that have it, that have good job centers, good economic employment. The rents are strong. We'll talk about that in another video of how we do our rental analysis on our properties. But with appreciation, remember, we don't get to realize that growth until we exit the property. Let's talk about real estate being a hedge against inflation. This is one of my favorite benefits that real estate provides. And right now, as we're in the midst of this virus, just recently, if you remember, over the last couple months in spring of 2020, Congress has passed some COVID-19 pandemic relief acts, right? The CARES Act. And over roughly about a 6-week period, we added about $6 trillion to the national debt. If you're not concerned about inflation, maybe it's something you should start learning a little bit more about, because it is going to be a problem for us in the future. In my opinion, real estate is one of the best assets possible to hedge against inflation, even better than precious metals, which tend to be the leader in this category. Now, as you look at anything in this country, over time, things are now more expensive today than they were years ago. Whether it's orange juice, oil, gasoline prices. I remember I'm 40 years old today. When I first filled up my first tank of gas in 1996, it was 86 cents a gallon for my car. Cars were cheaper. They're more expensive today. Housing is more expensive. Rents are more expensive. So we know over time things are going to get more expensive. What happens with inflation and why real estate is such a great hedge and tool against this is when you finance your properties, you lock in an interest rate today. And those rates can be varied between 4 to 5% right now, depending on the type of loan that you're getting into. That means over time, as things get more expensive, the cost of borrowing that money from the bank stays the same. So as everything inflates around us, your cost of borrowing that money actually gets cheaper. And that is why real estate is one of the best hedges against inflation that exists in terms of investments. Real estate gives you a lot of control. Now, for those of you that don't want to have all your decisions made by a hedge fund manager in New York that you've never met, you've never spoken to, you don't want to worry about what the president tweets and how that affects your 401k balance, you don't want to worry about things like oil prices, terrorist acts, right? A pandemic where we saw raging growth in the market up till about February, March 2020, and then we saw some great losses, right? Real estate gives you a lot of control. It's a physical, tangible asset. You get to decide what you buy, when you buy it, how long you hold it, what do you charge for rent, who gets to live and occupy that property, right? At the end, this is a wonderful opportunity for you. If you're wanting a little bit more control over your portfolio, real estate is one of those great assets that can provide it. These 6 benefits are just some of the few of why real estate can make sense for you. As you contemplate whether you want to see, wow, I have these assets, I have cash over here or stocks over here, and I want to get into some real estate, reach out to Bedrock Investment Property and let us create a customized real estate blueprint for you to see if this is the right opportunity. Thank you.